Therapy Geeks, a podcast by Luke McGibbon and Louise Taylor. Yeah, I feel the same way. I need to get on my best party frock, I can't be, especially over Zoom, People say like, oh sure you can do it all over Zoom. You can't. You can't do it all over Zoom.
I just think,
You can't.
what do you think? Do you think people have just got a lot more antisocial?
I think people got a lot more comfortable being antisocial, which is probably not bad, because we did have a world that was very focused on extroversion, didn't we, for a long time? I think a lot of the people protesting, a lot of the anti-maskers and stuff, I think a lot of them are extroverts who are, raging that for once they aren't in a world that is designed solely for them. But maybe that's a personal attack from my end, and I'm just I'm just talking shit.
Why would we stop talking shit now? We've been doing it for 4 years.
Well, sure, not for 4 fucking years. Yeah, well, extrovert isn't exactly like a race that you can discriminate against anyway, is it? Like, it's a thing. There's not going to be like extrovert pride parade, but like, I'll tell you what though, that does tie in well. That does tie in well to the theme of this episode, which we're talking about Oh shit! Can you hear that? I'm just fidgeting. Can you? I'm not like, it sounds like I'm opening a lid or something as well.
That well with discrimination and prejudice.
Well, because we were talking about discriminating and prejudicing. That's the verb, by the way. That's how you do it. I was prejudiced against it. They did a prejudice on me.
Extroverting. Comedian.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Stand-up comedian is hitting on extroverts.
Yeah. Well, sure. Haven't met them. They're all voices. Sometimes I do the door at the comedy night, and people go, "Oh, they're not going to make fun of me, are they? They're not going to pick on me in the front row." And I go like, I mean, they'll try, but they're toothless. They're toothless children, most of them. Couldn't take the piss out of a fucking toilet.
People don't believe me when I say I'm actually a mixture of extrovert and introvert, because I'm so loud and because I'm often found in rallies on the megaphone. I'm actually a mixture of both.
Hi. Well, I think we all are a wee bit. I think as well, that sort of that phrase or the word extrovert, it's got co-opted a bit, isn't it? Because really it was meant to mean the someone who was into the inner life, and that was it. Whereas it seems to have been co-opted into meaning like this means shy and this means loud. Whereas really it was meant to be more about like a balance between thinking of the unconscious and thinking of the inner world versus thinking of the outer world and being into things. Which of course we need a little bit of both of, or else you're going to be like, Buddha during his hungry phase, starving by the side of a river. You need balance between inner and outer, is all I'm saying. I got very distracted because my cat's on the windowsill right now. I don't know if you can see him. I know, but it's visual. It's visual. That's the thing, is unless I go into extreme detail describing the cat, and the sort of like a blind person could picture that cat really well. There's no point. There's no point in me keeping that in. But anyway, yeah. We were talking about discrimination and injustice in counselling, right? And we were talking about this beforehand, like, what do we actually mean when we put that title in the episode? Are we talking about for the clients or for us? And I thought, well, why not we just very broadly come at the subject and sort of see what happens? Because I think that, like, no matter what, like Yolom once said that, death is always in the counselling room. Like, it's always the unspoken of subject, no matter what people are talking about. But I think injustice is also that as well. That, like, anyone who's coming to you for counselling, they either feel that great injustice has been done to them, or that they've done a great injustice to themselves or to the world.
I don't know. It's a difficult one. I just think I was thinking sometimes that people are personalizing and internalizing and carrying a lot of stuff and we're trying to help them live good lives. That ultimately I see my role is helping people live a good life or feel better about things and improve their well-being. But people are walking around internalizing
Sure.
things like structural violences and institutional harming practices and things that aren't actually theirs. You know, it's very difficult to support people to live a good life when they're being heavily discriminated against in society, or they're being, you know, I don't know, it's just something that I become keenly aware of, I suppose, since I got my diagnosis through. I was always aware of, like I was doing my master's in women's studies and feminist research, and you know, in 2002. But now I'm aware of the other, you know, that this idea of other, and how do you keep people well in a society that is set up for certain types of people to succeed. So I don't know, that was where my kind of, my interest of it. And yes, Yolande talks, I love Yolande, he so loves Executioner, and just he talks about loving clients. Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Right.
But how do you help people
Absolutely
when
right.
you know the world is unjust? How do you keep them up?
Yeah, and I do think that's the thing we keep coming back to in this podcast, isn't it? About, you know, like individual change versus systems change. And I think really you kind of have a responsibility to the client
Yes.
for like both, you know, that like, yes, you know, you being the client deserve better, and you deserve to have been treated better, and you deserve to have been supported better by the system. And there's ways in which you can get active to maybe try and make it so that this doesn't happen to you again or happen to anyone else again. But that's a very long-term process. But it is rewarding to be involved in that. But then in the individual level, you know, there's stuff that maybe can be done right now to help yourself and things like that. And to do that isn't necessarily to surrender your agency as part of the whole collective of voters and pressure groups and people picking up litter by the side of the road. But it's something that exists alongside it. You know, like, why do we have to choose between taking responsibility and fixing your own life, or having the government to help you out? Why can't we have both? Why can't we have people be encouraged to like strive to be better, but also like actually help them? You know, like there's I don't know if you've seen this, but there was this big furor on social media recently about some, I don't know, she's done some reality show or something. She's called Molly May or something or other, and you know, she said, you know, well, you've got the same 24 hours in the day as Beyonce, and it's like, you don't know. You don't. Like, if you've got like 6 kids and you're a single mum, you don't have the same 24 hours in the day as Beyonce, because about 19 to 20 of those hours are done by are done with the duty of your life that you're kind of have to do. You know.
Molly May said that we have the same 24 hours as Beyonce, and people were outraged.
Well, I think they weren't outraged. They thought it was tone deaf. You know, to say you've all got the. Well, she said it as in like, as in to say, you know, if you don't have what you want, you're not working hard enough.
Which is like the myth of meritocracy. Which is like, we're all born equal,
right,
we're all
right,
born
and
the same, with the same opportunities and the same access to success. And if Beyonce can do it, what the fuck is wrong with you, Linda, down the road with your 6 kids who doesn't
right.
feel like, you know, you're not trying hard enough because Beyonce's got 24 hours for you.
Right, and that's where individualism goes. If that's all you do, if all you go is like, you know, the power to change society is in each person, that's where that leads us to that kind of thinking where you're like, well, you could be Beyonce if you put your head to the grindstone and didn't sleep for the next 20 years and gave your kids up for adoption, you know, like, but you know, the reality somewhere different, is in that we all get help. And even the most independent-minded people, unless you're living in the woods and hunting your own animals and making your own arrows to hunt them with, and starting your own fires and building your own fucking house, we all get help. You can't deny that you're part of a society and that you need help from that society. And you know, the amount of willpower alone is not what makes a person. It's a million other things, but and it's quite simplistic, isn't it? But I can't remember how we got here from discrimination.
I think that's quite important in terms of like the narrative, the cultural narrative that see, even the fact that we're talking about Molly May. Like, was Molly May on Love Island or something?
Probably.
So
I'm not
right,
actually
people
sure what she's
spend
done.
time watching Love Island, and then they listen to people like Molly May, and then Molly May gets a platform, and then Molly May's words are actually spoken about, and this narrative, and it's all, to me, it's like, it's all a big distraction from people really getting stuck into the real villains here, which are
Mm.
Molly May is a product. She's a product of this
Sure,
sick
yeah.
society
She's
that we
a
have.
yeah, she's a symbol
Oh
of what's
no,
wrong. She's
Molly
not
May
what's
doesn't
wrong.
have that amount of power, but the media will give her that, and then people
Yeah.
will spend their time distracted talking about what Molly May said, as opposed to really focusing on the inequalities, the injustices, the discrimination. Bell Hooks died recently. Desmond Tutu died recently. Bell
Mm.
Hooks, Bell Hooks constantly was critical in an incredible way, an incredible radical black feminist, talking about love and talking about, changing these systems. She called it the imperialist, white supremacist,
Mhm.
capitalist, patriarchal culture, right? Now, for most people, they're going
Mhm.
to go,
Mhm.
"What the fuck's she talking about?" and turn off this podcast. Whereas Molly May saying, "You've the same time as Beyonce in a day," people are going to be able to engage with that and argue and say that's wrong and Beyonce this.
Mm.
Whereas, why are we not having discussions on the level of bell hooks and talking about imperialism and white supremacy and patriarchy and things that are keeping people down? What the fuck would we do with 7 billion Beyonces? Like, who gives a shit? We're all different. But
Yeah.
actually, that the people are angry at Molly May is signaling that they're aware of injustice, but they're not using the right language or the right forum to actually really take it on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that in a sense, you're saying that it's a
Yes.
distraction from the main, the actual causers of these inequalities. It's been used to foster kind of space within class and well, class discrimination,
And
isn't it? So
sexism.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I did Google her while we were speaking a minute ago as well, and she did do Love Island. I think she was a
Right.
finalist of some sort. Um, I don't know how you get to the final of Love Island. Do you
Well,
just
you
love
look,
the most? You're the most
you
loving,
must be the
perhaps. I don't
most
know.
likable couple.
Lovely looking.
You
I
spend
see.
3 weeks on
Yeah,
an
yeah,
island with
yeah.
somebody who's really
Uh,
hot, you're gonna know what love is.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy to. It would be nice to believe that, wouldn't it? I think don't people keep like harming themselves after leaving Love Island?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm getting lost in my own little
yeah,
thing
no.
there, um, but there's actually like a strange, like really bad effect on mental health that Love Island has, and I mean maybe a lot of that's social media, but there's probably also a
Well,
million other horrible
well,
things
do you
that
not think
happen.
it's kind of similar to
Yeah.
like the pressure? You're like, right, you're on a reality show called Love Island and you win if you love somebody. That's a lot of pressure. That's pressure on love to happen and to perform,
Yeah.
and then you win at love, and then like that like actually, what is that even about? And that's why with bell hooks and the likes of Eric Fromm, and they talk about it like the art of loving, and bell hooks book all about love, new visions. Like, Love Island is not what love is. It's fucking bullshit. It's like, it's what is Love
Yeah.
Island? It is like consumerism. It's romanticized nonsense.
Yeah. It is to love what Doritos are to
Like,
Christmas dinner.
it's like
I don't know.
saying that a film is real life. Or it's like saying that we'll put you on an
Mm.
island and we think you're aesthetically really good looking for this culture, and then you are too, and then you should really match because you're kind of the same
Yeah.
kind of conventionally good looking, and then you're around the same age, so hopefully love will happen because like you're very attractive. Now I know as I
Mm.
age that I have generally been physically attracted to people who are dickheads.
Maybe you need to be more
I am.
discriminating.
So this is the thing, it's kind of like being aware. So I'm not surprised that after Love Island people get really sick because they've been told this is love and it's not. And it's confusing and it creates
Mm.
cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance and it creates real like I've won, and then the media's in their face, and now Molly May's being held up as a spokesperson for humanity and she's failed. And Caroline
Mm.
Flack, sure, what
Yeah.
happened with Caroline Flack and all that there? As soon as they're put on a pedestal only to be knocked down, and that's discrimination too.
The real
Yeah.
drop. Yeah. I'm wondering just about something you said earlier that since you're neurodiverse, um, diagnosis, that you said that you'd received some discrimination or you'd faced some discrimination since then, and I was wondering if you if you could go into it.
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit
Yeah,
before we
well, so
recorded
I
as
work
well.
neurodivergent therapist and really loving it. And now I only take on clients who consider themselves to be neurodivergent. And I have to tell you, look, it is the best career decision I've ever made. And this and the people who
Brilliant.
are coming to me, it's just brilliant. And I feel like I'm best equipped to deal with this section of society. Now, I got diagnosed at 42. You're aware. Talked about it quite loads on the podcast, but I got diagnosed,
Yeah.
and so I have that unique position where I can see what 42 years without a diagnosis, and then I can see. Now, I would also be quite open and so publicly open or whatever about it, and the way people talk to you, like. I would have never had problems with job applications, right? And I've applied for 2 jobs and I haven't even got an interview. I was always interviewed, and I would have been open. I haven't even got an interview. And I would have always been open.
Yeah, that is.
Like I wouldn't have had a diagnosis, so I had nothing to declare. But I've been open about it on 2 recently, and that's the other reason why I'm going full whap in my own business and developing it. But that's very odd to me. I'm very good at interviews and I get most jobs I've applied for. Now, and I've taken one company on about it. I've just been like, because they encouraged me to apply. And then it's very nerve-wracking being open about it, and then you're not even considered, like, even you're overqualified. So that discriminate and
Yeah.
the way people talk to you too.
Well, tell me a wee bit about that
No,
as
go
well,
for,
if you don't mind.
so you'll have people like yourself, you'll have people who, like at Queen's supervisors, there's no change. There's just respect. And there's people who will just, it won't really change. They might be aware of why I'm a bit different or why I find things harder, but it actually helps the relationship rather than hinders it, and the respect isn't lost. Then you have people, because they coming at you because people will come through their knowledge and their awareness. So, some people, I think, some people will just not connect with me. I won't contact. So friends have known for a while. I'll have heard nothing from. I've heard nothing. There's a lot of people who have not even mentioned or contacted me or anything about it, and I'm fine with that. And then there are people who just talk to you like you're a fucking dickhead. Do you know what I mean? They just talk to you.
Yeah.
Because they've got this, they don't understand it, they're not informed, they're not educated, and they clearly have prejudice, so they talk to you like you're a child, you know.
Yeah, that must be pretty frustrating.
Well, the example I talked about again was the person who was actually paid to come in and support me as an intermediary, and they basically were like saying that you've no empathy, and that's like really outdated, really problematic.
Yeah,
That's a really bad stereotype. Now, I have since told that company, like, that's bordering on defamatory considering what I do. Please do not bring people like that into my home to insult me in that way. But how many people have that ability to challenge services? How many people have that insight, have that, the written communication skills and things like that? So I do regularly, I love my mind, but like I say, like the dream we talked about, my processing's different. That's how I think I'm most disabled. I process things differently. I think a lot of people consider me very simple because I'm very friendly, and then they underestimate me all the time. And then when it comes and bites them in the ass, they think I'm just a bit nuts. But actually, just don't be an arsehole. You know?
Right, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, good
I
advice.
try not to be,
all
but
right.
it doesn't seem to do you any favors, and that's one of the things. One of the things I've had to get a lot of support, and from talking to parents who've children who are on the spectrum, a lot of them are teaching their children that people are really mean and not to trust them, because that's the reality. We're vulnerable because we're quite gullible and trusting.
Right, I see. Yes, so a certain amount of standoffishness is actually quite useful in that position. Would you say that's something you would like instill in your clients then, or is that something that you hear from your clients?
My clients, well, they're very different, very very, very good people, very good, kind-hearted, and I will generalize. That's what I see. That's what I know. Really, really good-hearted, pure people, but they experience the world differently, so therefore they are othered and they're not believed
I
a
see.
lot
Yeah.
because their experiences are different to the norm. So that
Hmm.
would be why I think a lot of people who are neurodivergent are discriminated against.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Like we tend to sort of other anything that doesn't fit into the sort of standard bubble of experience. And I do think that happens to quite a lot of clients as well, not just based on neurodivergence, but also along
Yeah.
lines of sort of race and gender, particularly in the last 10 years. Do you know, you know what I watched? I watched something recently. It's so I got really sucked into this weird YouTube hole of Big Brother.
Yeah.
You know the show Big Brother, from like somebody's put up the entire season from like 2005 on YouTube. And I just sort of was like, ah, that can't be real. And I clicked on it for like 5 minutes, and I ended up just watching it for like nearly like 40, because I think I just sort of assumed, well, I'll be bored by this because reality TV's moved on, and it is like an artifact. And there was something really struck me was that at one point they have a conversation about trans people, and obviously they don't know shit, and they're completely ignorant, but they're also really quite warm and accepting and understanding in a way that I feel like that if you stop people on the street now, you have a 50-50 chance on a good day of getting people who are that warm and accepting and understanding. And it really struck me that like that there's it's almost like the shit that trans people have to face to begin with, but like how much of that seems to have
Oh, yeah.
increased in the last decade, and it feels almost like it's been manufactured against them. I mean, um, that there's like this moral panic seems to have been created of, well, it seems to be different stuff every week about, oh, you know, they're going to trans children, or they're going to they're going to, you know, force people into relationships with them and things like that, and all of it unproven nonsense, I will say emphatically, and to the hatred of a certain aspect of Twitter that's quite
Yeah,
heavy,
it's so
um
weird.
but yeah, like the amount of shit that they
No,
take. But yeah,
it's
sorry, I
all
got a bit
connected.
lost
Because
there in
why
that. But
are people investing so much time and energy into scenarios that haven't happened, aren't the norm, to demonize a section of society which is already very vulnerable? It just shows you how
mm,
mean people are. Like
absolutely, yeah,
many people, not
yeah,
all
and
people, of
I think
course, but like I've thought this for a long time. Most of the people who come to counselling are there because of assholes who won't go to counselling, who think that there's nothing wrong with the way they treat people. And I
right,
do, I really think that.
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think it's annoying, isn't it? Because we end up having to work with these people to undo things that shouldn't have been done. That if the other person had come to counselling, as you say, and like it almost makes me think of how, well, you know, to bring up something of discrimination, like I'm sure, you know, many of us have worked with clients of different races, and even if they're not coming to talk about
Yeah,
racism comes
yeah,
up because it's something they have to face all the fucking time, and so it comes up in therapy regardless of whether that's the main thing or not. And you know, some of them are kids, right? And it feels like society's response sometimes is to go, well, you know, maybe they should toughen up. And it's like,
yes,
why are we expecting toughening up from these people? Many of whom are kids that we don't expect
yeah.
from their peers. You know, we don't have to. You know, there's generations of white kids who have not had to be told like, oh well, some people are just like that. You'll have to toughen up. Like, why are we going for
Oh my
victims
God,
instead of
and this is
perpetrators
what
here?
I'm doing
Um,
exactly with the police. I'm saying to them, the onus is on us not to be
mm,
abused. You are not targeting the how dysfunctional and how unhealthy. So the onus is on women, stay safe when you're out, your drinks might get spiked. No, that is so messed up.
mm,
Or don't write about what happened to you, Louise. Don't write about the abuse because that's going to annoy these men. Well, I'm like, well, they shouldn't abuse. The onus. So that's where the
mm,
narratives needs to change. And you're so right. Like my children, we're home educating. We have no behavioral issues. I do not have. We don't. We live in this peaceful bubble. Our children have friends that are very like them, but they're in different, and they don't. They're not around lots of people being educated in like toxic practices and toxic. They don't. They like self harm's not a problem. I don't have any behavioral issues because in this house we're respectful, we're caring, there's autonomy, there's individuality, and so it doesn't even come into their understanding, or doesn't that they have to be nasty or the world's a hard place. But I talk to parents and people who have children who are neurodivergent, and that is what they're saying. They're saying, I have to prepare my child for the world because the world's horrible. And I feel like I'm preparing my children to be so confident in themselves that they find their wee place and they find their wee people and they're treated well and they don't accept anything else. And that's a very different way to approach.
Yeah, and it's it's spot on as well, because when you talk about that other approach about like, oh, the world's terrible, you end
Yes.
up creating a terrible world. That many of the worst people tend to be. No, not this isn't to say anything about pessimists, but like a lot of nasty people are pessimists because they go,
Yes.
well, everyone else is doing it. Like how many times have you heard the phrase "life is unfair" being used to justify somebody
Yeah.
making life
Yeah.
unfair? It becomes a sort of paradoxical thing, and like the first victims the first victims become perpetrators to themselves in a sense, in that like okay, so we said even how maybe people come in to talk about race, that racism comes up, but it's not the main issue. But like maybe racism is the main issue, but they've been given this toughen up to it attitude, and so they just sort of go, oh well, that's just part of my life. That there's a guy in my class who makes Nazi jokes to me, or like all sorts of bullshit like that,
Microaggressions.
and yeah, absolutely, and stuff like that. You're going to end up working with anger in the room because they're being taught through this attitude
Yeah.
to kind of move their anger outside of it and detach from it. And it's like, well, I mean, that anger should be allowed. It's that anger's been earned by somebody
I
being a piece
love
of
that
shit.
because that's the other thing. People because of what happened to me and my kids, and they're like, "Oh, she's angry. She's mentally ill." No, I'm angry because this is not okay, and we shouldn't have to. And I think that was another thing I was saying. Women are going to be angry when they're constantly abused, and they're constantly oppressed, and people are going to be angry because it's a perfectly normal and healthy response to being traumatized, to being abused. But society doesn't like anger. They don't like it. I don't like being, oh, it's not okay, because everybody's supposed to be content. Everybody's supposed to be happy with the status quo, and it's supposed to be fine. And if you're an activist, like did I tell you about like one person who said, "Oh, when I see activists, I just really feel really sorry for them. Like, oh, poor you." And I'm just like, you're an asshole. I don't like that is such
Yeah,
a really,
yeah.
that is such
They don't need
an
pity.
entitled and privileged stance to take. Because I think when I hear like, see with the anti-vax and the anti-vaccine passports and all, I'm like, I don't agree, but you deserve respect and we should be listening to what they're saying. I don't agree. I am fine. I'm vaccinated. I'm boosted. I'm happy again because I believe that I've other fights that are more important to me, like the climate crisis and like femicide. So sometimes I'm sad that this is the flag they wave as opposed to other, which I think are much more pressing social issues. But that's quite snobbery too. But their anger is communicating something. And I'm like, right, what are they what are they telling us as a culture? And I think they're telling us that our culture, nobody trusts anybody. Nobody trusts information and people are not well educated. That's what I think it's communicating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is a big problem with that. I mean, that's a whole other episode, I think, on its own
Yeah.
about conspiracy theory belief as well and things like that. But yeah, I do know what you mean. That like, well, because you do find that as education goes up, and discrimination tends to trend downward. obviously I'm not saying it's a panacea. You know, I'm not saying it's a cure-all. Plenty of highly
Yes.
educated racists out there, of course. Um, but you know, it's simply because you get a broader sort of um, intellectual experience. I assume, because you know the cure for racism is always experience. You know, you find places that are really anti-immigrant, places that really voted Brexit. They're places that didn't really have that many immigrants there to begin with. You know, you introduce immigrants to a community, like there's a lot less anti-immigrant sentiment because immigrants have been met. They're not otherized. They're not this idea of the, you know, scary immigrant who's going to come do whatever horrible thing they say they're going to do this week.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. But let's you know, because I realize we're running out of time, so I'm almost like let's turn towards the something slightly more positive to end on, because I thought of the last. I re-listened to the last one and I was like, oh, good episode that. But I also thought, oh, we were quite depressed because of the topic, not because of us. We were class, obviously, but like,
Oh,
you know, like what about
well,
solutions and things like that?
well,
How can
I
we
want
how
to,
can we
so
work forward?
discrimination, prejudice, and um, I love this quote, right? Right, and it's about love. So
Uh huh.
I'm getting a bit obsessed with this because my thesis, I've decided that if it's not about love, I can't do it. So and my supervisor like, oh Jesus Christ. But anyway, love. So Cornel West said that tenderness. Yeah.
I love
Uh,
Cornell West.
and I love bell hooks in him because people think you're starting an argument when you disagree, but I actually love lots of people and I disagree with them vehemently, but I can still love them. And I think that's one of the things of this condition. You just, like autism, you just see things through a bit more of a critical lens, like a different lens, but you're often misunderstood because of that. But anyway, Cornel West said that tenderness is what love looks like in private, and justice is what love looks like in public. And I just love that.
Oh, wow,
So
that's
where
yeah,
do
that
you
is
see
lovely.
justice in public? So that's where I think you can start to see
Mm.
how where love is lacking in our culture, in our society, in our families, in everything. Because tenderness is what love looks like. Of tenderness is what love feels like in private. We have incredible rates of domestic abuse. There is so much terrorism happening in homes,
Mm.
within families, right? So there is love is lacking. And then when we look on the societal level, particularly in Northern Ireland, right? Where is the justice? Where are we seeing the
Uh
justice
huh.
in this culture? Where is the love?
Don't know. I mean, yeah, this is, well, I guess anywhere people
Yes.
gather.
Gather peacefully. So where would that be?
Mm. I almost want to say churches, but I don't,
Some.
I don't,
Yes,
because
some
it's not always
churches.
that peaceful. Yeah,
So
some
then,
more than
where
others,
would you
certainly.
know where justice
Um,
is in your
yeah.
community, in your home? Where would you know? And that's what I would love to leave people with, them being able to spot it and know what it looks like. Because I think it's
Mhm.
like it's where you feel safe and where you feel valued and where you feel heard and respected.
Mm, yes, yeah, and I think that's probably in therapy. You know, working with people who suffer from discrimination. That's probably where the solution lies, isn't it? Is allowing people to have these feelings that come from this negative response or the negative reaction they've gotten to their own existence. Is to forgive yourself for being pissed off, you know, and to forgive yourself for existing, because sometimes that guilt gets hung on
Yeah,
you and you don't deserve
that's
it.
right. Look, forgive forgive yourself for being
Very
pissed off.
good.
It's so weird that we've so demonized being angry. Like it's not that big a deal. You don't have to act out on it. You know, people just think if I'm
Mhm.
angry, I'm a bad person. I'm like, no. If you're angry, you're overwhelmed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you've had a lot of stuff happen. Do you know, actually, you know, one of the things I can maybe recommend to listeners before we go is if you go on YouTube and you YouTube my name and the words Carl Rogers after, um, I have managed to find this rare DVD of this experience that Carl Rogers, who's like a famous therapist, did in Northern Ireland in the 70s, called The Steel Shutter, where it's like this film where he got all these like encounter groups of different Protestants and Catholics during the Troubles and basically just made them talk about stuff, and they all sort of shifted each other's opinion a little bit. And like even in this short, I think it's only an hour like this one, but you can tell they've known each other for longer. um, you can see how they all come to an agreement on like how each other's paramilitaries are as bad as the other and have a bit of a grip on things, and it's just interesting the understanding they're able to reach whenever they're just allowed to speak to each other. But I do recommend you have a listen to that, because it's relatively uplifting, gives you some hope for this little rock on the Atlantic. If that's
like, I was saying that whenever I was finishing the meeting recently, what I was telling you about, and I was saying, we've got to be ready to have uncomfortable conversations. Like, if I'm to progress and I'm to forgive, or not even forgive, if I'm to trust our services, they have to listen to my experiences and how horrific they've been, or they have to listen to my clients' experiences and how horrific they've been, and they have to stop dodging uncomfortable conversations. Now, abuse is not acceptable, but me saying I'm not happy with what happened is not abusive. Me saying this is my experience and this is what's happened and it's really impacted me is not. And that's where people in Northern Ireland, they don't even want to listen to other people's pain. They don't want to face the fact that all of us have experienced pain. And so I always say this, if everybody's the victim in Northern Ireland, who's the victim? So those uncomfortable conversations, as somebody who's been arguing with a service, like arguing with them, and I mean it, I've been really challenging them and writing to them and expressing how uncomfortable, how I'm not happy with the way I've been treated and what they've done. I'm finally making headway because I'm able to do it with respect.
Yes, yeah, and meet some people in the middle. So it's a good prescription, isn't it? Get mad, forgive yourself for getting mad, and then get talking.
Be aware that we're all humans. But that's the thing in Northern Ireland. People don't talk and they shut themselves off and they stay in their little tribes.
Yeah. And then you end up just sort of confirming your own biases forever and ever and ever. But I'm not going to end on that, though. It feels like an instruction. You know what I mean? It looks like I'm saying, why don't we all go back to the old tribe, have a little powwow about the Protestants,
I was brought up Protestant, you were brought up Catholic, right?
I was.
Why do we get on so well? Why do we talk? It's like this cross community crap. It's like,
because everyone else in the country is fucking stupid.
But most of the people I'd say I'm friendly with now are from the Nationalist Republican community. That's really weird to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's I mean, so much of it is just the circles you travel in.
So that's what I'd say. We say, right, find your people, follow your interests, as opposed to what you've been taught. Find those people who you're able to just say what you think and not be silenced, and not, so if it be a therapist, or if it be in the comedy circuit, or if it be like people up in Queens who are PhD students and all that, there were talking out against capitalism, and so find those people. That's how I think you can heal, and how you can thrive after injustice and prejudice and discrimination.
Lovely. Follow your bliss.
Oh, look, that's beautiful.
Good. Well, we'll end on it then. It said something sufficiently not depressing. Thanks for listening to Therapy Geeks. Find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Deezer, Listen Notes, Stitcher, Podcast Index, and Buzzsprout. Give us a like or a follow or a subscription, whatever your podcast app allows. Thanks for listening.